Hey, welcome back. If this is your first time to the channel, glad you found us. Behind me, 2013 Honda Odyssey. We're doing the big one. 100K service. This video will be timing belt, water pump. I think the hardest part of this job is pulling the crank pulley off. So we'll start there first. Jack the vehicle up, put it on jack stands, pull its tire off. So now we'll pull the wheel well off. There's a couple of Phillips, a couple of clips, and some 10mm bolts. Once we have all those removed, this shield will come out. I might be in the way of filming while doing this. Don't feel bad if they break. You can get new clips from the auto parts store. There's a lot more fasteners than you realize. Now that opens the way here. So now we have access to our crank pulley. We just want to break this bolt loose. Those are on really tight and hard to break. They make a tool like this for Honda. It fits right inside here. Then you have a 1/2-inch wrench holding it here while you have a breaker bar on the center nut, and you can break it loose. 19mm. The other way is to get you one of these. Earthquake XT from Harbor Freight. It's a beastie impact. Let's see if we can get it. That's a negative. So as I was saying, they make these. Let's get this in there. So I found a beastier impact socket. Let me see if that works. The amount of metal on the outside is important. So let me just give it another whack. Got it. So lesson learned, a beefier impact socket and the Earthquake XT. So that's the hard part. Now let's go do the easy stuff. So there's a couple options with the engine coolant. You can pre-drain it. The drain plug is right here under the vehicle. Or when you pull the water pump off, you can catch it all then. Either way works. To get the belt off, it's this pulley right here with a 14mm socket, and we'll push away from ourselves towards the vehicle. Don't use too long of a ratchet like I did. Once the belt's off, the tensioner releases all the way, and then it just hits on here and I can't get it out. So I'm gonna have to put the belt back on, get a smaller ratchet, or get this from underneath, and then maybe the ratchet will clear. Before we get too far, we want cylinder 1 at top dead center. This is the diagram. I'll show you what that looks like on the vehicle. So there it is on the crank. In my opinion, not the easiest to see. Let me show you an alternate method that I find much easier. So if you come up right here on the front timing cover, there's a little plug right here. Pull that off. Let me see if I can get you in there. We're going in. Right there, you see that number 1 with that mark? You line it up with that plastic notch, and that's much easier. So let me show you. You can actually see it best from the wheel well. Right through there. You see it? Oh, my flashlight. Right in there. Get it to focus. There. So when you're turning the crank down here, you're just looking through this hole until number 1 lines up with the notch. And that's more pronounced, a little easier for me to see and identify. So now we're cylinder number 1, top dead center. So now we want to support the engine under the oil pan with a jack and a wooden block. I'm using a towel for mine. You just don't want the jack metal directly against the oil pan metal. So next we want to remove this bracket. Kind of hard to see from this vantage point, so I'll show you on the computer what it looks like. So that's what we're removing. Those are the bolts that need to be removed. So you want to get this side one first. And you can get to it by just removing the power steering pump, pushing it out of the way. Get to that side one. Then you want the two top ones. So pulling the bolt off the bracket, pretty easy. But getting the bracket out itself, kind of interesting. A lot of wiggling, twisting. Not the easiest to get out, but it will eventually come out. So don't give up. Once it's out, you can go ahead. See, I don't have my jack under there anymore. Pull the jack out. The engine has 3 other mounts holding it up, so the engine's not going anywhere. And you'll want that jack out later when we pull the water pump off, trust me. So next on the list is removing the 2 upper timing covers. Once the uppers are off, then we'll go to the lower and pull that cover off. All 10mm bolts. The belt tensioner I find it easiest to get from underneath. 14mm center bolt, and then a little side bolt, 12mm. Once you got the bolts off, you just turn it sideways and it comes out. Before we can get the bottom cover off, we got to get rid of our crank pulley. We already busted loose the bolt, so that's good. And typically you don't need a puller for these. They're on there kind of loose. They come off. So that's it. Now we can get to these bolts and pull that cover off. So now we want to take off this bracket. There's 3 main bolts and then 1 little one up here. So 4 bolts all together. So to get this bracket off here, most of the bolts we'll get from underneath. But there's that top bolt that the manual showed here. For that, we'll have to remove the power steering pump. There's a bolt right here that I already got out. And then there's one underneath. So just 2 bolts diagonal of each other. Pretty easy to get to. Power steering pump can just move out of the way so we can get that top bolt out. So that's all we need. We'll get a socket on that and pull it out. In order to remove this top recess bolt, we have to remove this dampener. In order to remove the dampener, we have to remove the engine computer. Now there's a bolt up here and then one right underneath in between these 2 connectors. Don't have to disconnect anything. We just want it back enough so we can get to that 10mm bolt right there. That 10mm bolt, once that's removed, this harness bracket can be moved out of the way so that we can get to that bolt way down there, 17mm. And then this side, 17mm right there, is a lot easier to get to. Once you're able to get the computer back, you can get this long extension. These are 2 extensions together. I think it's a 10 and a 6 together. I recommend these with the little swivelly tops on them to get in there. I'll put a link in the description. Keep in mind that that's pretty tight, so it's gonna take some gusto to break it loose. But these are broken loose. I'm gonna pull that out, and then we can proceed with that mount there. So there's actually a 3rd bolt. So for the sake of things, I'm gonna disconnect the battery so we can unplug the engine computer. We're gonna pull the fuse box off so it can be put over in there. This whole bracket has to be moved out of the way to get to that one there. So, a little more work than I thought. Alright, there it is, free and loose. There's a bolt here, this one for the fuse box, bolt here. This one down below doesn't have to come off. It just needs to be loose because it's notched. I believe that's it. There may be 1 or 2 more, I forgot, but that is out of the way. So now we can get access to that bolt. We'll zip off real quick. And hopefully now that damper will be free. Alright, with that removed, you can just slide this out of the way. There may be a better way to do it. The manual doesn't talk about doing any of what I just did. It just made sense to me that that had to be moved out of the way to get to this. I tried getting it before moving stuff and I couldn't. So now there's plenty of access to get in there on that bolt. So now we can remove the belt tensioner, the 2 pulleys, and the timing belt. Once the timing belt's off, then we'll tackle the water pump. And pull this off too to get the belt off. Now it's just hanging here. So from here, to get the old water pump off, just a series of 10mm bolts. Once those become loose, you'll start dripping some coolant. A lot of coolant will come out when you pull the old one off. So have your catch pan under there. That's why we removed the jack, so you can get room to put your catch pan under there, because you'll lose a lot of coolant. So we want to make sure our engine surface is free of debris or old gasket. Put our new gasket in the new pump. We're ready to put it on. We'll tighten these down. I'll show you the torque specs on the computer. Alright, there you go. Water pump bolts, 9 foot-pounds. Right, from this point, everything is pretty much in reverse order. Because recording isn't the best, and for the sake of time, I'm just gonna run through kind of the important steps. So first we wanna get our pulleys back on. This is the adjuster pulley, 19 foot-pounds for that. And then this is our idler pulley. We got 33 foot-pounds for that one. Once our pulleys are on, this is the sequence of how to route the belt. We should have our cam marks already lined up and our crank mark lined up. So we start with A, around the crank pulley, then go around the idler, B, then the front cam, C, water pump, D, back cam, E, F, so in a counterclockwise direction. Once that's on, we can put the tensioner on, 9 foot-pounds, double check everything, and then we're ready to pull the pin. That'll tighten the belt up. The manual doesn't have you do this, but what I like to do is once the pin is pulled, the belt is tight, is to hand rotate the crank 2 full revolutions. So 2 revolutions on the crank equals 1 revolution on the cam, and then you're just double checking to make sure that the marks line up. If the marks do not line up, then we'll pull the belt back off and try it again. If it does line up, sweet, we're ready to go to the next step. Before routing the belt, you could put this bracket on, and that'll hold it to the crank so it's not slipping off as you're trying to route it around. So you want the belt to fit perfectly in its groove. And when you're going counterclockwise, let me readjust the camera. You want it tight. This barely moves. That's as tight as it can get. You can't go one more notch. So you want everything tight on this side really tight as you route it all the way around. And then, let me go down underneath. If there is any slack, it's on the tensioner side. See how this side is loose? That's the tensioner side, so that slack will get picked up. But this side is really tight. That's what you want. So all your slack on this side. Once you're confident that you have it routed right, we'll go ahead, pull the grenade. Maybe. I'll do it two-handed, but pull the grenade and then the tensioner will tighten up any of this slack on this side. I'll put the crank pulley on temporarily just so I can turn the engine. 2 crank revolutions equals 1 cam revolution, and then I'll double check our timing marks. For the crank pulley, it's 48 foot-pounds initial and then an additional 60 degrees. So our next step is putting the engine bracket back on. These are the torque specs for that. Then our lower timing cover, our upper 2 timing covers. We have this engine mount to put back on. Then we have the other half of that engine mount we could put back on. And then here's the belt routing if you need it. All right, there you go. We'll put the wheel well back on. I'm waiting for some clips before I can finish that. Other than that, fill it up with coolant, run through a bleeding procedure. You'll raise the RPM to about 3,000 and then let it drop, raise it up, let it drop. Do that about 5-6 times. Take it for a test drive. Make sure your gauge doesn't get too hot, and that should be all you need to do for the bleeding. Hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you on the next one.